The Pentagon has a $1.7 trillion problem, and it isn't a foreign adversary. It's the invoice. While the F-35 struggles with bloated maintenance costs, Sweden's JAS-39 Gripen is proving that fiscal efficiency is a lethal strategic weapon. Is America's air superiority being bankrupted by its own industrial complexity? In the freezing skies of the Arctic, a David is outperforming Goliath. The Gripen's radical cost per flight hour is disrupting decades of U.S. military doctrine by prioritizing software agility over hardware excess. We're dissecting how this lean Swedish fighter could ground the world's most expensive stealth program through sheer economic attrition. What if the secret to winning the next great power conflict isn't more stealth, but better logistics? The Gripen's revolutionary maintenance-to-capability ratio is turning the F-35's dominance into a strategic liability. Discover how Sweden's high-tempo defense operations are redefining modern air superiority and scaring the Pentagon's top brass.
For decades, modern air power was measured by one question: who has the most advanced fighter jet? But today, inside NATO war rooms and Pentagon budget meetings, a darker question is rising. What happens when the most advanced jet becomes too expensive to fly often enough? That is the industrial paradox of modern air power. The F-35 is not just a fighter, it is a flying data center. Stealth, sensor fusion, electronic warfare, strike capability, networking, and intelligence collection packed into one platform. But every layer of capability adds another layer of maintenance, software dependency, spare parts pressure, and long-term cost. The U.S. Air Force describes the F-35A as a multi-role fighter combining stealth, sensor fusion, and advanced situational awareness. But that same high-end architecture creates a sustainment burden that no Air Force can ignore. And this is where the numbers become dangerous. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the projected sustainment cost of the F-35 fleet jumped from $1.1 trillion in 2018 to $1.58 trillion in 2023, a 44% increase. GAO also reported that the U.S. plans to operate the F-35 through 2088, pushing total acquisition and sustainment costs above $2 trillion. Even more alarming, the services are planning to fly the aircraft less, while availability has declined, and none of the F-35 variants are meeting availability goals. That means the real threat is not only enemy missiles, it is budget gravity. Every extra dollar spent keeping one aircraft alive is a dollar not spent on more aircraft, more missiles, more pilots, more flight hours, and more wartime readiness. A fighter that cannot be flown enough becomes a strategic contradiction, powerful on paper, limited in practice. Now compare that with Sweden's philosophy. The Gripen was not designed for perfect bases, massive logistics chains, or endless contractor support. It was designed for survival. Saab says Gripen was built to operate from regular Swedish roads at secret road bases, with maintenance simple enough for a small number of conscript mechanics and one certified technician. That changes the entire equation. While the F-35 represents maximum capability through complexity, the Gripen represents combat power through availability. Saab says the Gripen E can operate from dispersed and unprepared road bases or airstrips and can be refueled and rearmed for an air-to-air mission in around 15 minutes with limited ground crew and equipment. This is why the Gripen's cost per flight hour argument is so disruptive. An Aviation Week network study prepared on behalf of Saab estimated F-35 operating and maintenance cost at about $46,282 per flight hour, while Gripen EF was estimated at about $22,174 per flight hour. Because the study was commissioned by Saab, it should be treated carefully, but even with caution, the direction of the argument is clear. Gripen is built around lower operating cost, faster turnaround, and higher sortie generation. And in real war, sortie generation is not a minor detail. It decides how many pilots get trained. It decides how often aircraft are available. It decides whether a small air force can keep pressure on the enemy after the first missile strike hits major bases. So the Pentagon's nightmare is not that Gripen is more advanced than the F-35. It is not. The nightmare is that Sweden may have solved a different problem, the problem of affordable readiness. Because in a long war, the winner may not be the country with the most expensive jet. It may be the country that can keep more jets flying, more pilots trained, and more aircraft ready when the war refuses to end.
The real disruption behind the Gripen is not only its low flight cost, it is the way the aircraft is built to evolve. Most fighter jets are upgraded like old war machines, slow, expensive, and deeply tied to certification cycles. But the Gripen E was designed with a different logic. Saab separated mission system functionality from flight-critical software, allowing new tactical applications to be updated faster without disturbing the core flight safety system. Saab says this architecture allows software updates within hours and lets the aircraft adapt from day 1 to day 2 of a conflict as new threats appear. That is the iPhone-style idea. Not literally a phone, but the same principle. The hardware remains in service while the software keeps evolving. A new weapon, a new electronic warfare technique, a new sensor mode, or a new data link function does not always require the entire fleet to be frozen for a traditional midlife upgrade. This is where Gripen becomes dangerous. It turns air power from a fixed platform into an updatable combat ecosystem. Saab's Gripen E uses a layered avionics structure where sensors, actuators, and software applications can be integrated more flexibly than in traditional silo architectures. Aviation Today reported that Gripen E's distributed integrated modular avionics approach lets line-replaceable units function more like one system, with software applications introduced in an agile way once interfaces are available. But software is only half the story. The second layer of disruption is logistics. Gripen was built for ugly war, not airshow war, not perfect runways, clean hangars, and massive contractor teams. Its support concept is designed around dispersed operations, small crews, and fast turnaround. Saab's Gripen support page says an air-to-air combat turnaround, including refueling and rearming, can be done in less than 10 minutes using 1 technician and 5 conscript mechanics with only 10 weeks of training. This is not a minor maintenance detail. In a high-intensity conflict, minutes become weapons. If one aircraft needs hours of ground time and another can land, refuel, rearm, and launch again in minutes, the second aircraft can generate more sorties, train more pilots, and survive better after the first missile strike hits the main airbase. That is Gripen's lean logistics model. Fewer people, less equipment, smaller footprint, faster re-engagement. Saab also says Gripen can operate from dispersed and unprepared road bases, and the Gripen E can be refueled and rearmed for an air-to-air mission in around 15 minutes with limited crew and equipment. Now compare this with the F-35. The F-35's digital backbone is extremely powerful. It connects stealth, sensors, mission data, electronic warfare, and maintenance into one advanced combat network. But that strength has also created a vulnerability: complexity, dependence, and slow modernization. The latest GAO report says the F-35 Block 4 modernization effort is now more than $6 billion over earlier estimates and at least 5 years later than originally planned. It also says the $1.9 billion TR-3 hardware and software upgrade was the main driver of late aircraft deliveries in 2024, when all 110 delivered aircraft were late by an average of 238 days. This is the hidden danger of a software-defined fighter. When the software pipeline slows down, the whole industrial machine feels it. The jet may be advanced, but the upgrade cycle becomes heavy. New capabilities do not arrive at battlefield speed. They move through contractors, testing, certification, budget approvals, and integration bottlenecks. And then comes the policy problem: control. GAO says the Pentagon relies heavily on contractors to lead and manage F-35 sustainment, while DoD still needs to identify the technical data and intellectual property required to shift more control to the military services. Air and Space Forces magazine, summarizing GAO's findings, reported that contractor reliance and lack of technical data have limited depot repair capability, delayed repairs, and forced maintainers to rely on contractor personnel for tasks they would otherwise be qualified to perform. So the Gripen does not attack the F-35 by beating it in stealth. It attacks it through architecture. One aircraft says maximum capability through deep integration. The other says survivability through speed, simplicity, and upgrade freedom. And this is why the Pentagon should pay attention, because the next war may not reward the most complicated fighter. It may reward the fighter that can be updated faster, serviced faster, hidden faster, and sent back into the sky before the enemy even understands where it came from. The next air war may not begin with a dogfight. It may begin with a missile strike on the runway. That is why modern air forces are moving toward Agile Combat Employment, or ACE.
The logic is simple. If the enemy can target your main air bases, then your aircraft must stop behaving like they belong to one base. They must move, hide, refuel, rearm, and launch from multiple locations before the enemy can find them. The U.S. Air Force describes ACE as a shift away from large traditional bases toward dispersed forward locations, making air power harder to target and more survivable. This is where the Gripen becomes lethal in a different way. It does not need to defeat the F-35 in stealth to disrupt the F-35 model. It only needs to prove that in a missile-saturated war, runway independence can become as important as radar invisibility. Saab says Gripen can take off from roads as narrow as 16 meters and around 500 meters long, and land on about 600 meters of road. That means the aircraft can disappear into highways, forest roads, and temporary strips instead of waiting on a perfect airbase. Gripen E is also marketed as capable of operating in extreme climates and from dispersed, unprepared road bases or airstrips. Now look at the contrast. The F-35 can also train for austere operations. In September 2024, 2 U.S. Air Force F-35s landed on a highway strip in Finland during exercise Bana 2024. But the F-35's strength is also its burden. Its stealth depends on low observable maintenance, which the U.S. Air Force itself describes as specialized, intricate, and essential for the jet to remain undetectable in contested airspace. So the difference is not F-35 cannot disperse. The difference is this. Gripen was born for dispersed war. F-35 is adapting to it. In cold weather, that matters even more. A rugged fighter operating from Sweden-style road bases has a natural advantage in the high north. In March 2026, Reuters reported that Sweden deployed 6 Gripen fighters to Iceland for NATO's Arctic Sentry mission, with Swedish officials emphasizing that the aircraft is built for Swedish climate and has a low logistical footprint. Now imagine the battlefield.
A NATO airbase has been hit. Fuel storage is damaged. One main runway is cratered. Satellite passes are watching every large airfield. The F-35 squadron still has technological superiority, better stealth, deeper sensor fusion, stronger penetration capability. But each sortie needs more planning, more protection, more maintenance discipline, and more support infrastructure. Meanwhile, a Gripen unit splits into small teams. One aircraft lands on a road strip, another hides under tree cover. A small crew refuels and rearms. Saab says Gripen's air-to-air combat turnaround can be done in under 10 minutes with 1 technician and 5 conscript mechanics, while Gripen E's refuel and rearm cycle is around 15 minutes with limited ground crew and equipment. Now the math becomes brutal. This is a hypothetical combat model. If one F-35 squadron can generate 1 sortie per aircraft in a stressed, dispersed environment, but a Gripen force can generate 2 to 3 sorties per aircraft through faster turnaround, smaller ground teams, and road base operations, then the Gripen does not need to be more advanced. It only needs to be more persistent. One F-35 may be more capable in a single mission, but 3 Gripen launches can create more patrols, more missile threats, more air defense pressure, and more uncertainty for the enemy. That is the lethal math of distributed warfare. Persistence can overwhelm perfection. And this is the nightmare for planners who built air power around a few exquisite platforms operating from large, expensive bases. Because in the next war, the enemy will not only hunt aircraft in the sky, he will hunt them on the ground. So the question is no longer just which fighter is more advanced. The real question is which fighter can still launch after the runway is gone.
Modern air power is no longer only about who can buy the most advanced fighter. It is about who can keep flying after the budget, the supply chain, and the war itself start breaking the plan. This is where the Gripen becomes more than a fighter jet. It becomes a political weapon for countries that want credible air defense without turning their national treasury into a maintenance fund. Look at Brazil. Brazil did not choose Gripen only as an aircraft. It chose Gripen as an industrial strategy. Saab's original Brazil contract covered 36 Gripen NG aircraft, worth about 39.3 billion rupees, with a major industrial cooperation and technology transfer package for Brazilian industry. In March 2026, Brazil unveiled its first domestically assembled Gripen, becoming the first Latin American country to assemble a supersonic fighter jet on its own soil. Reuters reported that 15 of the 36 jets are to be produced at Embraer's facility under the technology transfer agreement. That is sustainable defense. Brazil is not just importing a jet, it is buying skills, jobs, production knowledge, and long-term aerospace sovereignty. For a country with huge borders, Amazon airspace, Atlantic maritime routes, and limited defense spending compared with great powers, this matters. The Gripen gives Brazil a modern air defense shield without forcing it into the full financial gravity of a fifth-generation stealth ecosystem. Thailand is using the same logic from a different angle. After Washington declined Thailand's F-35 request in 2023 over training and technical requirements, Bangkok moved toward the Gripen E-F. Reuters reported in June 2025 that Thailand planned to acquire 12 Gripen fighters over 10 years, with the first phase budgeted at 19.5 billion baht, about $596 million, for 4 jets. Then, in August 2025, Sweden signed the first deal, 3 Gripen E jets and 1 Gripen F, including equipment, support, and training, valued at around 5.3 billion rupees, or about $556 million, with deliveries planned from 2025 to 2030. This is the new geopolitics of fighter procurement. Smaller and mid-sized air forces do not just ask which jet is the most advanced. They ask, which jet can we afford to fly, upgrade, maintain, and politically control for the next 30 years? And then comes Sweden's NATO accession. On 7 March 2024, Sweden officially became NATO's 32nd member. That single event changed the northern map. Finland had already joined NATO. Now Sweden's air bases, roads, sensors, submarines, and Gripen fleet became part of NATO's northern defense architecture. The Baltic and Arctic no longer look like distant edges of Europe. They look like a connected northern wall. In 2026, that wall became visible. Reuters reported that Sweden deployed 6 Gripen fighters to patrol Icelandic airspace as part of NATO's Arctic Sentry mission, with the aircraft focused on monitoring Russian long-range bomber activity from the Kola Peninsula area. This is not symbolic. The Kola Peninsula is one of Russia's most sensitive military regions, linked to naval power, long-range aviation, and nuclear deterrence. In that environment, Gripen is not trying to be an F-35 clone. It is trying to be a fast-reacting, low-footprint Arctic defender. The electronic warfare angle makes it more serious. Saab says Gripen E combines ASAP radar, passive infrared search and track, and an improved electronic warfare system designed for detection and disruption of threats. Saab also says the Aresis EW family uses ultra-wideband digital receivers, DRFM technology, gallium nitride ASAP jammer transmitters, and advanced signal processing to handle complex modern signal environments. Gripen E is designed for a battlefield where the enemy is not only firing missiles. The enemy is also jamming, deceiving, tracking, and trying to blind the pilot before the missile is even launched.
By 2030, the question may no longer be, which fighter is stealthier? The question may become, which fighter can learn faster? This is where the Gripen story becomes dangerous for traditional fifth-generation thinking. In June 2025, Saab announced that a Gripen E had flown with Helsing's Centaur AI agent fully integrated on board under Project Beyond. Saab said Gripen's design allowed AI software to fly on an operational fighter without needing an experimental X-plane or being restricted only to military test ranges. Saab's message was clear. In the software age, there are no generations, only speed. That one line changes the future of air power. For years, stealth has been the crown jewel of aerial dominance. But stealth is not magic. It is one advantage in a much larger kill chain: detection, jamming, data processing, weapons range, pilot workload, decision speed, and survivability. If AI-driven software can improve radar behavior, electronic warfare response, target recognition, threat prediction, and pilot decision-making, then a non-stealth aircraft can start closing parts of the performance gap, not by becoming invisible, but by becoming faster at adapting.
This does not mean Gripen will suddenly become an F-35. It will not. The F-35 still has stealth, deep sensor fusion, and massive NATO integration. But the future battlefield may punish aircraft that upgrade slowly, and that is where the F-35 faces pressure. GAO reported in 2025 that F-35 Block 4 modernization is more than $6 billion over earlier cost estimates and at least 5 years behind the original schedule. Reuters also reported that F-35 deliveries faced significant delays because of postponed TR-3 software and hardware improvements. So the debate is not whether the F-35 is powerful. It is. The debate is whether its dominance can survive a world where good enough technology becomes cheaper, faster, and easier to update. This is the uncomfortable truth. In a long war, perfection becomes expensive. Every hour in the air costs money. Every software delay affects readiness. Every maintenance bottleneck reduces combat tempo. And every advanced aircraft sitting on the ground becomes a political and strategic liability.
Gripen attacks that weakness. It does not promise to be the most advanced fighter in every category. It promises something more practical: high availability, rapid updates, low operating footprint, and enough combat capability to stay relevant. That is why the future of aerial dominance may not belong to one perfect machine. It may belong to the side that combines high-end stealth with affordable mass, AI-enabled upgrades, dispersed operations, and aircraft that can keep flying under pressure. Even the U.S. Air Force is moving towards this logic through collaborative combat aircraft designed to add affordable mass and human-machine teaming alongside crewed fighters. So by 2030, the battlefield may look very different. The F-35 may still open the door, but aircraft like Gripen may keep the pressure on after that door is open. And that is the real nightmare for the Pentagon's old model of air superiority. Because the next great air war may not be won by the jet with the most advanced brochure. It may be won by the Air Force that can launch again and again and again after the bases are hit, after the budgets are strained, after the supply chains are exhausted, and after the war becomes a test of endurance. In the end, aerial dominance will not only belong to the side with the smartest sensors or the stealthiest skin. It will belong to the side that can afford to keep its engines running the longest. If you found this analysis valuable, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected for more defense updates. Thanks for watching.